This is perhaps the most boring topic that anyone on YouTube could ever make a video about, but it is simultaneously one of the most important aspects of successful gardening and landscape design. Today we're going to talk about mulch. A basic understanding of mulch best practices, common mistakes, mulch myths can save you so much time on maintenance, energy, resources, money. This means that even if you are very early in the landscape design planning process, you haven't started digging yet, you don't know what you're going to do yet, it can still be good to know. How much mulch are you going to need? How deep should it be? When are you going to need it? How will it affect your soil, like in aspects like nitrogen and pH, should those be concerns? This video will be the first in a series of videos about mulch basics, and essentially I'm creating the video series that I wish I had when I first started. It would have saved me about 1,000,000 years of pulling weeds and just trial and error in general. So I hope that this thrilling saga about mulch will help you with your upcoming landscaping project. And by the way, my name is Eve Hanlon. I'm a landscape designer, I'm a horticulturist, and this is Garden Project Academy. I'm based in the Pacific Northwest corner of the USA, but remember, you could live anywhere in the world. Mulch best practices are going to be different everywhere. Materials that are available are going to be different everywhere. Soil science will be different everywhere. So even though this is good landscape design information, always do a little bit of extra digging, pun intended, a little extra research just to make sure that this will also apply to you. In general, all of my videos, it is always up to you to decide what is best for you and your yard. The first thing I want to share in this video is the reason mulch is so important. Why is it important? Most know that mulch is a good thing, but it's still good to get a refresher on why. You use mulch as a soil covering to prevent weed seeds from germinating, protect the soil from erosion, decrease evaporation, which decreases irrigation needs, right? It moderates the soil temperature, which makes plants happier, and eventually natural mulch materials will decompose and become compost and feed the soil. It's overall just important to creating a healthy, low-maintenance garden ecosystem in many climates. Now, a quick and extremely important clarification. Do you know the difference between mulch and compost? Of course, sometimes the term can overlap in different contexts, and sometimes people just use the word mulch as a verb. But in my videos, I'm going to be referring to two different things when I say the word mulch versus the word compost. Mulch and compost serve two different purposes. Compost is decomposed organic matter. It is soil. It can be decomposed or composted manure, yard debris, leaf mold, kitchen scraps, and so on. Compost is amazing. It is a great soil amendment when you need organic matter or certain nutrients in your soil, but it does not serve the same purpose as mulch. For example, as mentioned previously, weed suppression. If you mulch with compost, you will smother some weeds, but some weeds you are also going to fertilize, and weed seeds can germinate in compost really easily. Just remember that I am not recommending compost as a soil covering, especially for things like preventing weeds. I'm talking about mulch. Mulch is a material that has not yet decomposed, often a woody material like wood chips or bark, though there are so many different kinds of mulch. And I'll talk more about mulch types in an upcoming video, and when that's done, I'll link to that in the top corner right now, as well as in the description below this video. You use mulch as a soil covering. That is what, again, prevents weeds, it prevents erosion, decreases irrigation needs, and so on. It's like mimicking a forest floor. It makes your garden an ecosystem that supports living things and decreases the need for control and maintenance in the process. Now, what does mulch maintenance look like? Mulch is a bit of an investment, and here's a silly little chart that I made to demonstrate this. A holistically low-maintenance landscaping or gardening project is kind of an investment up front, and mulch is a big part of this. The first time you uncover the soil or otherwise go from no garden to garden, you'll need to apply the most mulch. After that, you'll only need to reapply mulch periodically. The frequency and amount of reapplication depends on the material you use, how deeply you apply it initially, your climate, and many other factors. It could be every year or every few years, or if you use something that decomposes really quickly, like grass clippings, for example, that could be every few months. But for wood chip or bark mulch in my area, you could apply once per year or every few years. My advice is to reapply a bit of mulch when you start to see an uptick in weeds sprouting or germinating in your garden area. Also, the denser you plant, the less you will need to mulch over time as plants fill in. It's also super important to mention that no mulch will ever prevent weeds entirely. You will still need to weed. It's still something that you will just need to do routinely in any landscape. And this is because weeds are amazing. They're resilient and they serve a purpose in the ecosystem. So I talk a little bit more about weeds in another video, which I'll link to in the corner of this video and in the description below as well. There will always be weeds, but there will be a lot less, tremendously less, if you mulch and mulch properly. Mulching deeply enough is a big part of this. And it's also a trade-off, right? You spend a bit of time mulching, you spend money on mulch, or you spend a lot of time weeding. Again, it's an investment. This leads to our next question: how deep should mulch be? And of course, this all depends on what you're mulching and what you're using as mulch and why. But just in general, let's talk about now if I'm planting a new garden where the weeds have been removed for the most part from the area. Maybe the soil's been turned or tilled. Maybe you top dressed with some like a soil amendment, maybe not. Whatever you did, you cleared most of the weeds from the soil. You're starting a new garden area. If you are using wood chip mulch, or a favorite of mine, which is arborist chips specifically, the best practice is considered 4 to 6 inches or 10 to 15 centimeters deep. And I know that sounds like a ton of mulch. This is what the research says. This is what best practice is. I have had pretty good success myself with about 3 inches or 8 centimeters of arborist chip mulch, or 2 inches, about 5 centimeters of bark mulch. I'm not doing the best practice, so there are still going to be some weeds peeking through, but I find it to be a pretty manageable amount. And I know that even 2 or 3 inches or 8 centimeters can feel like a lot of mulch. It seems really deep initially when you first put that out there. But again, this is an investment. It'll settle down after a few months and it won't be as deep. And of course, be sure to taper the mulch down around your plants a bit so they don't get too covered up. You never want deep mulch to be against plant stems or tree bark. It'll create all kinds of problems. So, you're going to be tapering the mulch around your plants. Even if your landscape looks bumpy, apply a deep amount of mulch to start. Future reapplications won't need to be as deep. If you're smothering existing weeds or lawn, that can be different. You'll likely need to go much deeper depending on what you're trying to cover, the weeds or lawn you're trying to cover, and the material you're using. And again, when it comes to arborist chips, which is like a wood chip mulch, some sources say that 8 to 12 inches or 20 to 30 centimeters is best practice. And I've smothered the majority of weeds from some spaces with as little as 6 inches or 15 centimeters. And again, it depends what you're covering. Go as close to best practice as you can, and I'll talk more about mulch materials in a future video. At this point, I want to pause and say to not feel overwhelmed. I have gotten away with using slightly less than recommended best practice. I never use less than about 2 inches or 5 centimeters though. Also, I should mention some species of weeds are going to be more aggressive than others and can require a little bit of extra attention. So check out my video again on reducing weeds to learn more about that. Now let's talk about 3 quick mulch myths. And myth number 1 is regarding soil pH and mulch. Will mulch change your soil pH? This is a myth. pH is very important, of course, to gardening and plant selection. Different regions will have different pH levels, levels of acidity or alkalinity in their soil, and this affects what plants can grow where. This can be changed slightly with the right amendments and time. However, it is a myth that mulch will significantly affect your soil pH. It takes a long time, like many, many years, for bark or wood chip mulch to start affecting your soil pH, enough to even have any effect, or go so far as to change the type of plants that you can grow in your soil. Even pine needle mulch takes years. There are other soil amendments that can adjust your soil pH if you need to. Just don't stress out about mulch causing pH problems or not mulch because you're worried about the pH change. It's not going to be a problem. Myth number 2, it's also a myth that woody mulch material will bind up all the nitrogen in your soil. Nitrogen, of course, is important to healthy plant growth. And if you add carbon-rich materials like wood chips, for example, to your soil or your compost pile, some of the nitrogen in your soil will naturally be tied up for a time during the decomposition process because soil science is amazing. However, you do not need to worry about mulch tying up enough nitrogen to create basically any impact on plant growth. There is an impact close to the soil surface, right, where the material is interacting with the soil. And so this can depend on what you're growing, like maybe some shallow-rooted plants or seedlings or vegetable garden plants may be slightly more sensitive or affected by this, but this just shouldn't be a big concern in general. I mulch my vegetable garden, even my tiny vegetable seedlings, with wood chip mulch, and it's perfectly healthy. I've never noticed, anecdotally, any impact on plant growth. And the science says that this should not be a concern for you. The research says that this is not going to have any effect on the growth of your plants. It should not stop you from using mulch because, in fact, some mulch materials will increase the nitrogen in your soil over time as they decompose and feed the soil. And you're going to be creating a healthy soil ecosystem overall by using mulch. The soil life will be happier. That leads to happier plants. Don't let this nitrogen myth stop you. Myth number 3 is that using mulch in the landscape will attract insect pests. And of course, different materials can attract or support different pests, and you have different pests in different climates, and there are so many variables here, so always do a little bit of research. Here in the Pacific Northwest, using like a wood chip or an arborist chip mulch or a cedar chip mulch is said to it's not going to increase the odds of a termite or ant infestation. This is just a common objection. Mulch is out because of the pests. This is a myth in general. Mulch is not as good of an environment for many kinds of common pests. Of course, do your own local research, but these materials may not attract as many pests as you think they do. Just don't let this stop you. These are simplifications, of course, and the finer details of every single one of these topics could be discussed for hours. There are people who spend many years researching every aspect of these myths that I'm sharing. So this is just an overview. Always do your own research, of course, and figure out what's best for you in your yard, in your part of the world. But in general, just don't let these myths stop you entirely from using mulch. I hope that this video has helped you, and watch for more mulch videos coming up. And if you have any additional questions about mulch, please share them in the comments below. I have some additional resources linked in the description below this video. You can also check out my free mini course on how to choose the perfect plant, how to put the right plant in the right place. You can check out my waitlist for my upcoming Design Your Own Landscape Layout course, and just, you know, the socials, the newsletter, some additional resources, other videos. Check all of that out. It's in the description below this video. Thank you so much for watching.